Welcome to the green room with my library. I've had the shock of my life in the last 24 hours. I do not have as many books as I think I do because there are gaps. There are gaps in this bookcase. Not a lot, but look, gaps. I am sitting in the sitting room, which is the first time I have been able to do that. I have not actually sat in this room since we moved, which is not that long ago. We were sort of laughing about, we've really got into projects very quickly this time. So this is the third house that we have bought, which sounds like we own just so many houses. That is not the case. We have had the opportunity to do this multiple times, but I feel like it's probably a bit of age and a bit of just having lived in old houses before now that I just feel so much more confident in, I guess, in my style and my taste, but also in just really acknowledging that it's not a big deal if you paint a room and decide that you don't like it later. It's not a big deal to just do things and try. And I think I've always been so precious about that before, where I've just never wanted to make a mistake. I've never wanted to stuff up. And so I do nothing. And the other part of that would be, gosh, not last year, the year before now, I was lucky enough to do quite a bit of travel that year. And I went back to Italy. I had been to Italy before. And I went to Egypt. I spent 2 weeks in Egypt where I had never been before. And the use of color and texture and pattern was so extraordinary in both all over Egypt and then also in Italy that I think it really shook me out of wanting everything to be white, neutral. All the wood has to be exactly the same tone and match perfectly. It sort of was just overdone. And I think maybe that was a style for a while. So I probably sort of came up in an era of interior design where that was how everything was looking. At least I guess what I was reading. But I'm so over it now, and I want color and I want texture and I want patterns and I want mixed timbers and I want patinaed brass, and I love the look of a really multi-layered home. In your early 20s and you can not afford as much new furniture, what you do is you either go to IKEA or something like IKEA, or you do a Facebook marketplace, auctions, secondhand stores, and you just slowly assemble, and you do without until you can afford to have something. And so I took the opposite route. Obviously, I am sitting in front of IKEA bookshelves at the moment. I'm not a purist, but I do think that beautiful homes take a long time to come together. And I even put a little reveal reel on Instagram this week of the room painting coming together. But often I think on Instagram, I see a whole room coming together in a reel, and maybe eventually I'll get there, but it's not kind of a weekend project to do over a room. It takes thousands of dollars, I think, to furnish a room. And so it's not going to happen in a weekend. It will, there's places, and I'll show you, there are places in this room where it would be nice to have a piece of furniture, but until I find something that works well there, it will just be empty, or it will have something in the meantime. And we just don't see content like that anymore. And I miss that. Anyway, I actually just came in here to show you my bookcases, but you got a whole thesis on my interior design philosophy and my content philosophy, which I didn't even know that I had. So anyway, let me show you this room. So the lighting's going to change, but this is the bookshelf wall. It's still a mess, as you can see in here. Anyway, you can see this beautiful, so this is Dulux bay leaf, and it's just this beautiful, soft, but kind of still dramatic green. That's how the room is looking at the moment. I'm very happy with it. Of course, I now want my armchair, my ottoman, a nice big rug, and I'll put some art on the wall. I think I've got I'm sort of just, again, just using the furniture that I already had. I now sort of have this big display, and I've got these beautiful paintings. Well, they're prints actually. And obviously I need to go book shopping. That's clearly the case. Oh, I did put all of those cookbooks away. Funnily enough, I did put all of the cookbooks away and then realize that's probably why there aren't as many books in there as I thought there would be. So maybe the cookbooks will come out, but I'll probably just treat myself to a few books as well. Video 3. I think this is consistency. Or does consistency only count after 3? I guess we'll see. Welcome back. Thanks for being here. I have been thinking in the last couple of months, I'll tell you this book that I've been reading that spurred this thought. But my thought is basically, we have way too much input. We have too many experts. We have too many people all telling us what they think and what we should think. It's not just a matter of the money that we're spending on subscriptions to, streaming platforms to watch movies and shows, Substack subscriptions, newspaper subscriptions, magazine subscriptions, books that we're buying. There's lots of things that we actually spend money on. But even more than the money, it's the time. How can you possibly get anything done? How can any of us get anything done? It feels like a full-time job to read newsletters and watch movies and read books and participate in, cultural and current affairs discussions. And it's completely overwhelming. I read this fantastic book just before Christmas. So Jancis Robinson, for people not into wine, is probably considered one of the world's most respected wine critics, I think we could call her. She is the editor, or was the editor, of the Oxford Companion of Wine, and is still the wine columnist for, I think it's the Financial Times in the UK, and lots of other things. She is a very successful content creator these days. I was reading this, so this book is her memoirs more than it's about wine specifically, although of course in her life those things are intimately and intricately combined. But in her memoirs, she just wrote this one passage, and it completely jumped out at me, so I'm going to read it to you. Again, it's about wine, but hear me, just stick with me here. Individual wine consumers are better off, my argument goes, following an individual wine critic's preferences and prejudices and getting to know how they relate to their own, in the same way that we filter for what we're told by, say, individual theatre or film critics. The thing here that stuck out to me is the idea of following an individual wine critic's preferences and prejudices and getting to know how they relate to their own. Why that stuck out to me is, I guess, this idea of how can we actually develop our taste. And this, as I say, this is about wine, but more generally, I'm talking taste about anything from wine and food to anything cultural, films, books, TV shows. How do we best form an opinion? How do we best form our own taste? And I think that I am convinced by her argument that we can develop our own taste by comparing our opinion and our judgment with a few other people's. So if it's films, you might choose two, maybe 3 film critics that you love to follow, and you might read their critique of something and then think about how that contrasts to your own, as opposed to just this deluge of recommendations. And I think the reason that this is top of mind for me is because now, more than ever, I am more publicly making recommendations. I don't think it's helpful to just make a recommendation. I think you need to explain what you think, why you think the way that you do. And in order to have formed that opinion, unless you are considered, one of the world's foremost experts, I think you need to have taken into consideration other people's opinions. And I think it's more interesting to present an opinion on, say, a film. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more interesting if I tell you about a film I've enjoyed, to also tell you what the Slate Cultural Gabfest film critic was also talking about, and how they formed their opinion, which will be more educated as a film critic, certainly, than mine. I guess there's two things here. One is just this dealing with this sheer amount of information, this deluge of information. You know, I get hundreds of emails every day. I have hundreds of podcasts lined up, ready to listen to. I have a couple of books to read. I love films, and my Just Watch, which is where I keep track of all of the films that I'm recommended or films that I want to see, it's got hundreds of films in there. I won't possibly get through all of this in my entire lifetime. How do I start to cull down where I take recommendations from, where I am interested in learning more? I need to thoroughly curate the curation. Oh my gosh, this is getting ridiculous. I feel like there are content creators and journalists and all sorts of people. There are all sorts of people who are making recommendations. Whether that's wines you should drink, whether it's films you should watch, books you should read, recipes you should cook, holidays you should go on, bags you should buy, mascara you should buy, whatever it might be. I personally need a way to curate the curators. Is that a thing? That feels so ridiculous. That seems surely that's a modern problem. Surely that's a problem that's been created in the last 10 years at most. And how do you balance that with, I think we all absolutely know, if not, we are starting to realize the importance of diversity of perspectives. So how do you manage having a diversity of perspectives while also really trying to curate the curators? How can I make sure that, not that what arrives in my life is stuff that I definitely agree with. That's absolutely not interesting. That is not my point here. How do I just curate the perspectives? How do I reduce the noise so that I'm getting sort of the highest quality for me information and content? Does anyone else have this problem? Am I just like a content hoarder? And I absolutely am. This is what I realized. So after I read this book, I actually made a list. What a surprise. I made a list of who I follow, what I follow them for across different interests. So here, it's on my phone. I'll give you an example. So I started by going through my bank statements and actually just working out, what do I pay for? What subscriptions do I pay for? So for example, New York Times, a few different Substacks, Netflix, Prime Video. I've just joined the Starling Club, Jamie Beck's beautiful online community, to check out what they're doing and if that's a nice online home that I want to spend some time in. I'm curious about the Australian because I'm curious about their new culture section. If you subscribe to the Australian, I would love your opinion. And also they do have a great wine columnist. AFR, I have a gifted subscription to through work, a few others. But then I'm just going to show you the length of who I subscribe to. And this is already culled. I'm going to show you the list of people I subscribe to just on the topics of food and wine. Are you ready? That is already slightly culled from where it was when I started this list, because there were people immediately, I was like, it's nothing against them, but it's not a good fit for me. I don't cook that kind of food, or I don't, whatever. That is so much content. If every single one of those people is sending one thing a week, that is 19 updates I'm going to get every week. And most people are creating weekly content. So let's say I cull that further. Let's say that's 15. It's 15 things I receive every week just on food and wine. Then I need to absorb somehow. The reason that I sign up for these things is to gain value from them, right? So I intended to when I signed up to them, allow space in my life in order to consume that content and to do something with it. I can't do that. I absolutely cannot do that. I need to dramatically reduce how much comes in so that I can have, I guess, a higher quality relationship with that information and content. So that's what I've been thinking about for the last couple of months. How do I just reduce some of the noise? Because there are so many talented people out there. I would love to triple the number of things I read about food and wine, but I don't have the capacity to take that much in. And a lot of it is kind of dead information. It's not information I can do anything with right now. And therefore, it has to be information that I really love to consume, but I don't have time to enjoy. I don't have that much leisure time to just consume beautiful content. I do absolutely have time to do that with some places, so it's not that I'm just trying to cut out everything. I absolutely love to read a beautiful recipe or a recipe book or a recipe Substack. I absolutely love to listen to a podcast about culture, and I don't love to listen to the news, but I do absolutely take in some news content. So this is something I'm thinking about at the moment, and I will walk you through in the live curriculum what I have done, what I've actually started to put in place to curate the curators. That sounds such a ridiculous sentence, but that's how I feel about it. Anyway, thank you, Jancis Robinson, for that thought-provoking paragraph. Also just a really fun book if you are into wine. So the next thing I'm doing, which will take only a minute, but I thought I will show you, is I am starting my sourdough startup. So I went to The Source. I love The Source so much. It's such a beautiful way to shop for your dry goods. And I would just spend a lot of time just pottering around The Source, but I did not. I went in and out to get a few things, and one of them is rye flour, because in my experience with sourdough starters, rye flour just gives you a really great starter. I guess it's a little bit more alive than there is in plain white flour. So this is the book I will be using to kind of refresh myself on my sourdough journey. I got into sourdough making probably in like 2018. I had bought my first house. I was in like homesteady, domestic mode, even before COVID, early adopter, and it just didn't really feel like something I wanted to do anymore. But now I do. And I think part of that is because I have an idea of, it's like I love to bake, but I don't just want to make cakes every day. What am I going to do with cakes every day? Apart from the obvious. But that's not good for my health. So I will not just be making cakes every day. And I think that really we go through maybe 1.5 loaves of bread a week. And if I was to make 2 loaves every week, sometimes that there would be overflow, which I will gift to friends and family. But if I was to make 2 loaves of sourdough a week and probably cut and freeze one, I think that would be a very good rhythm. And so I think finding that rhythm of how often you intend to make bread is kind of crucial if you are intending to make bread making part of your habit, part of your routine. So anyway, I have a jar that is too small. I was looking for a bigger jar. I don't have one. I will probably go op shopping this weekend and grab some larger jars, because you just don't buy. You do not need to buy new jars. There are so, have you ever been to an op shop? There are like a gazillion jars at every single one of them. So anyway, I'm going to use this for now because it'll be fine. And all you do to start a sourdough, if you're not familiar, is you add equal parts flour and water. So I'm just going to probably put 2 in just for safety. And I will show you in next week's video the progress of this, but this is how simple it is to actually get started in making sourdough. it's flour and it's water. So, as I say, this jar is too small, but this won't be active for a couple of days. So all I'm going to do is stir this together, put the lid back on, and tomorrow add a bit more flour and a bit more water. And it will be active probably by day 3 or 4, depending on the weather. I will show you that in the next video, a little bit of the starter journey. And I probably won't, I mean, maybe I'll be making a loaf of bread by the next video. Anyway, we'll have a look. So they are my thoughts. That is my sourdough starter almost once it's stirred, which I'm not going to do because it will be loud. And I'll just update you on some bits and pieces. And then, as always, we will do life curriculum. David put some artwork up for me yesterday in the sitting room, which is just one of those little, it's not even all of the artwork, but it's just a little step in the right direction. No big room reveals here. This room is going to take a long time to come together. So it's a little bit, I should have filmed this at night. It's a little bit tricky to see. But basically both of these prints are libraries. So this one is the Pantheon in Paris. And then that one up there. Oh, that's the trick. You just have to get it from down under. That is the Vatican Library. And these prints just give me so much joy. And I've always had them displayed since my dad gifted them to me 5 years ago, probably even longer. But they just feel so perfect here in my little library. That obviously all needs a zhuzh, but that, you know, that's another day's problem. And yes, there's cardboard boxes everywhere in this house, but here is the other. So this is the Royal Institute in London. And so that is going to sit in this little vignette area. Oh, and this was unboxed very, very quickly. This is my little Nicolette Johnson piece. And okay, there's still a hammer from putting up the paintings, and then this will go, I haven't totally decided yet. This is an old Art Deco elevator sign from a department store. Isn't it amazing? And then these are the buttons, and they're old Bakelite. So I'm kind of thinking there. And maybe putting the signs on the wall here, although that might be a bit cute. One question I wanted to ask, do we go contrast here or keep it green? I'm thinking green, David's thinking contrast. Let me try and get you in better light. No, apparently that's just not really going to happen. So you can kind of get a sense here that these are white. I mean, they're bright white at the moment because they're undercoated, but do I keep them contrast like the rest of the trims around the windows, or do I just paint them green to match? And there'll be a contrasting probably ottoman there, probably white, or maybe even like a beautiful terracotta or something. I think green. That's my personal opinion. Keen to hear what you think. I'm not sure how totally secure you are sitting on the back of my couch, but let's see. So let's talk life curriculum. So this week I want to start with a do, and I am recommending this week that if you're in Australia and if you have an ABN, I don't know if you know this because no one I know has known this so far, that if you go onto Dulux's website, as in the paint company, you can sign up for a trade account because you have an ABN, and you can get up to 30 A4 paint samples like these ones at a time for free. It has been a huge help for helping us decide paint colors around the house so far, which will be, I'm sure, at least a year-long process, if not longer. But also if you're crafty, great for collages. I don't know, like I just feel like beautiful pieces of colored paper are just fun to have. And so as I say, you can have up to 30 at a time. I was a little bit cheeky and did an order of 30 and then another order of 30, and they didn't care, they just sent them to me. I feel like they know that they're going to make their money back. And really make sure that you explore all of the paint colors. Like there are thousands and thousands of them. Don't just go to the, you know, like the top 10 greens or the top 10 blues. Our process has been, do one of these. Actually, it's been like get all the little things from Bunnings, then move to these off the short list from the Bunnings chips, because these just give you a lot more size to look at. And then shortlist from this into actual samples on the wall. You can look at different combinations. You can really get to see, you know, two greens that might look very similar, but one is more yellow and one is more blue, or whatever it might be. You can really start to understand the different colors that you're looking at. Anyway, it feels like no one knows about this, and maybe Dulux doesn't tell everyone because it's a free thing, but you know, Dulux will be okay if we all order a few free paint samples. So I guess that is number one, get some paint samples, but number two is paint. Does painting suck? Abso-freaking-lutely. Painting sucks. It is a really, really laborious process, but it is so fulfilling. It is so fulfilling to see this room completely transformed in one weekend. And we sort of had to really start from the beginning with our paint supplies. We didn't have brushes or anything anymore. We I think either got rid of or gave away all of our supplies. So it cost more than it probably would if you were already a little bit set up. Like I think it cost us probably the best part of, I'm gonna say $700 to paint this room, including drop cloths, including brushes, rollers, everything. So we probably have about 4 or 5 liters left of undercoat, which will be great. That'll be another room. And we do have a bit of this green left over as well, which, you know, might get reused in a different room or a different project, or if a friend wants to use it, whatever. It does, obviously not every project needs to be a complete room repaint, but a piece of secondhand furniture, whatever it might be, it is so fulfilling to just completely revitalize and make this space so much more personal. And I'm thrilled with it. 2-part, one is get some free paint samples, and the other is to actually just paint something. The next one I want to talk about is make, and it is to make a list. This is following on from this idea of curating the curators. Once I had started to have this thought, I couldn't unsee just how much I was subscribed to, is mostly it. Across subscription being sort of a general follow, subscribe to, whatever it might be. Substack, podcasts, streaming platforms, I've got 2 of those, etc., etc. Like I couldn't unsee just how much information I was trying to let into my life. No wonder I felt like my brain was just at saturation point and I had no unique thoughts of my own. And I sort of, it's almost like I had lost a bit of my own taste, or maybe had an underdeveloped taste, because I was just allowing all of this information to kind of like tell me what I should do and buy and think and blah, blah, blah. And so my recommendation is, as a starting point, either create a list of everything you subscribe to. If that is too big of a job, I'm talking about like all the YouTube channels you subscribe to, all the Substacks you subscribe to, all of the newsletters that you subscribe to, everything. If that's going to be too long, which it was for me, I got started and just went like, it's hundreds and hundreds. Instead, do the opposite. Think of the major categories of information you like to receive. So, you know, each of your interests and hobbies, maybe business or work related as well. The news, if you watch or consume information about the news, whatever it might be. So for me, I had sort of categories like food and wine, history, culture. I then said culture because I wanted it to encapsulate everything from literature to movies and beyond. But you might list those out if any of those one things are enough of a passion. And just list out the things that you like to receive information and content about, and then choose 3 to 5 channels, whether that be a certain content creator, whether that be a certain newsletter, even if it's e-commerce, it doesn't matter. Things that you actually, if you received nothing else, you would love to just read those or listen to those or watch those. And then have that list somewhere close to your computer or your phone. And when you receive things that are not on that list, unsubscribe. Just start unsubscribing from things. I have hit that unsubscribe button, to misquote YouTube, so many times in the last couple of months because I realized how much extra I was receiving, and Instagram is still an absolute loose cannon because of the algorithm and you get all sorts of things that you don't ask for anyway. But I have just started to dramatically reduce what comes into my life that I have to decide if I want to engage with or not. And so I just receive hundreds of less emails. I just don't see a lot of things. And then I don't have to be worried about, have I read them? Have I engaged in them? Have I listened to it yet? Blah, blah, blah. So my recommendation is to make a list of either everything that you subscribe to or your top 3 to 5 creators, writers, thinkers, critics in each of your major interests, and unsubscribe from most of the rest. That's the recommendation. And then finally, I want to preface this by saying we will not always talk about cookbooks. We won't even probably always talk about books, but I am not making that promise. So this is a read recommendation, and it is to read a cookbook. And I say that because even if you don't love to cook, I find that readable cookbooks, if we can call them that without making it sound like all cookbooks aren't readable, are really in tune with the seasons. And I think that is a good thing for everyone, regardless of how much you love to cook. Because I think that we are very out of touch with the seasons and, of course, what we should be eating each season and what should be available each season without flying it in from other countries. But also just I think cooks are very good at being in touch with the seasons in a way of how you actually live in each season. I'm going to show you a couple of the cookbooks that I have that I think are wonderful to just read, with this particular idea in mind of sort of how to live more than how to cook, I suppose is what I'm saying. So I spoke about this last time, but Nigel Slater's book, The Kitchen Diaries, is written as a diary. So you can see that he's got sort of the dates here. And if it relates to a specific recipe, he will write out the recipe. But you can see here, there's no actual recipe there. I'll find you so here, for example, there is a recipe. It is just a beautiful reminder of living with intention and noticing details and just embracing what you have at the moment. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And then this is another book that I think is just really lovely to read through. And again, it has lots of recipes, but it also, these recipes are based on mostly fiction. Actually, I think all fiction. So if you are a reader, this is a really lovely cookbook because it takes ideas or mentions in certain books and she's developed recipes for them. So for example, Currant Buns starts with a quote from The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. And then there's a beautiful sort of little bit of a story about how Kate Young, the cookbook author, sort of thinks about that and has developed a recipe around it. And I think if you are into books, that is a lovely, that would be such a great gift for someone who is, especially someone who's into food and books, but if they're just into one of them, then it's a great sort of introduction to the other. So that is my recommendation this week, is to read a beautiful seasonal cookbook, even if you are not much of a foodie. If you don't want to buy one, grab one from the library and spend time immersed in this world of people who are very good at slowing down, living with intention, noticing details, embracing imperfections. And I just think cooks are really, people who love to cook and eat are just good people to be around. And so we should all have more of those in our life. So that is our life curriculum today. I thought I was going to do more reading, which is why I put my glasses on. Actually, speaking of reading, I'll tell you what I'm reading at the moment, but I have to say, I had to throw in the towel with The Elegance of the Hedgehog. I got halfway through and I still wasn't loving it. It wasn't gripping me and it was slowing, I didn't want to read. I think I've finished one book so far this year, which I normally would read probably a book a week. Not that I'm trying to get to a certain number, but I just think it says a lot that I just was so dragging the tail on this. So I'm not saying no to this book. I'm just saying that it is not a now book. I do feel like some books you just open at the right time. So I am retiring that one for now, which I always feel guilty about, which is so silly. But I'm picking up this one next. Heather Rose. I loved Bruni. She wrote Bruni, which is it doesn't read as fiction. It reads like a news story, but it is a fictional story based in Bruni Island off Tasmania. Or I guess it's part of Tasmania. But it is an island off an island off an island. A sort of political thriller set in modern day. I think it was written maybe 2019. And the story is basically a very contentious bridge has been built connecting, I think, Tasmania to Bruni Island, which has always sort of prided itself as being this beautiful, almost nature reserve, untouched, largely. And so this bridge sort of means that anyone can come and go very easily. And so it's very contentious. Anyway, the bridge is bombed. And it's the story of sort of working out why and who and all of the rest of it. Anyway, it is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my, I think, top books of whenever I read that a few years ago. So we'll read, very happily read another Heather Rose. I haven't read her other book, which is I understand is very popular, which I think is The Modern Museum of Love. Something like that. I haven't read that. I probably should. But how can I not read this? Let me read the blurb to you. Soaring from the champagne vineyards of revolutionary France to London and early colonial Australia, A Great Act of Love is a spellbinding novel of legacy, passion, and reinvention. Was this written for me? I think this book was written for me. So, That is what I'm reading. I have not even started A Great Act of Love. I only got it today, so I will start that tonight, and hopefully, if it's great, I will have finished it next week, as I normally do, and I can talk about it then. So that is the live curriculum for the week. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, I suppose. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week, back in the green room.